Hey, how's everyone doing tonight? We are back with the Nerds MC podcast, and today we have a variety of topics for you. So, Cody and myself are going to be covering Half Life 3, how Valve can't count to 3, and then we're going to dive into a more technical conversation around TypeScript and all things Node. Cody, anything you want to add?
Uh, it's not that I don't think Half-Life 3 is going to be coming out. I'm hopeful that by us talking
I don't know,
about it,
man.
it'll be coming into existence. That, and I know zilch about Node and TypeScript. Like I have dabbled in them, but I am definitely not an expert, so I'm definitely interested in hearing that topic of conversation today.
All right. Which one do you want to start with?
Um, let's go ahead and kick it off with Half-Life 3 and basically the non-existence of it.
All right, controversial take. I don't think anyone at Valve cares about their legacy as probably one of the founders of modern conventional gaming, and I think they're too busy making money hand over fist to ever begin to consider counting to 3. They have released Half-Life 1 and 2, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, Team Fortress 1 and 2, Dota 1 and 2. Now they've released Counter-Strike 1 and 2. I have yet to see them ever count to 3.
Well, technically, they didn't do Dota 1. Dota 1 was the mod for Warcraft 3. They were just Dota 2.
Okay, fair enough. Fair. Two, not 3.
Yeah, it's
Two.
kind of funny that it started off at 2. Um, well, it's not so much that I don't think they can count to 3 as much as they haven't had a reason to build a new game. So something that if you look at Valve's history, they have gone really deep into the idea of when they made a game, it was because there was a technological advancement at that time, like in the gaming space. And they wanted to build a game on top of that, like new technology or new technique or, some other.
Are you insinuating Half-Life Alyx was our Half-Life 3? Do we live on that timeline?
Kind of. I mean, I don't know.
Oh,
Have you
no.
played it?
No, because I don't have $1,000 for an index.
Well, that's what's funny is I played it on a Meta Quest 2. Yes, I did kind of sell out and go for that one, but I also went for that one because it was under $300 to pick it up. That and it plays VR games basically on its own. Like I have a few that I just install on it. You don't need a computer. But it's, the reason I bought it is because Half-Life Alyx came out and I was blinded by the words Half-Life and I instantly bought it. I did not have a VR headset at this time. And that's when I then went and saw that it was VR only and then had to turn to my wife to be like, so we're buying a VR headset.
You didn't ask, you told.
Well, yeah, I mean, come on. Half-Life is one of those things, like, if I had to, I'd take a second mortgage out of my house. So,
Oh, God.
yeah, I'm a Zoe.
Okay. No, I mean, like, Half-Life is literally one of the most foundational, revolutionary franchises in gaming. I don't think anyone can argue that. But for me as a fan, who has literally played this game since 1999 when it fucking came out, there's no way that I could justify VR. I couldn't. And I admit, Half-Life Alyx is probably the only real VR game that's not just a tech demo. And I can't justify multiple hundreds of dollars for a single game. I just can't.
I mean, if you really want to, I find it funny we're talking about this over the podcast, but if you really want to, you can borrow my Quest 2 and we could get you to play Half-Life Alyx. Though your space might be a little cramped. You might have to do it over at my place, but it's only like an 8-hour game, so it's not a lot.
Hey man, if you'll let me invade your space to experience it, I'm down.
Okay. We will definitely have to rectify that, and we will come back onto the podcast to get your opinion on it. But at least for right now, what I can say is I'm not going to spoil it, but I will say it is a bit of a continuation, kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird because it definitely plays out, and I do believe Valve made it. Well, correction, Valve did make it, so I'm pretty sure it is canon at this point, and it tosses some things onto its head.
Okay.
And so, like that, without going too much into spoiler territory here, I'm just gonna say Half-Life Alyx. I don't know if we can count it as a 3, because it's not like it continues past episode 2. But though it kind of
I've heard
does,
it like modifies the story. It retrofits some things, brings some new things in, and just kind of changes the way some of the events are interpreted. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say that is fair. And that's, I guess that's what I'm kind of trying to get to, because I've realized by saying that it didn't continue it, I was kind of spoiling that. But it's also like, you're right. It's not that it does it, but it changes everything.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm like, it's kind of hard to say if it's a 3 or not.
Yeah.
Definitely plays like
I mean, speaking of things and kind of like the Half-Life universe and things that augment the story, what's your take on Entropy Zero?
Entropy Zero. What's funny is I actually have those. I picked them up during a Steam sale, I believe. And they sat on my Steam Deck for a bit. I went to go try to play it. It didn't quite work on Steam Deck, so I just uninstalled it. And I've been meaning to install it and play it on my desktop, but I haven't really had a time to play it. But I do have to say that, at least from the Portal perspective, I've played games kind of like that, where it is a play on like different events and stuff that happen like alongside the series that the community's kind of been doing. Like Portal Revolution is one of those. I like what the community's doing. I really do. And part of me kind of like hopes eventually Valve kind of goes and says, well, maybe we aren't the only ones that have to make Half-Life style games. Maybe we break it out to the community and we just bless the ones that we want to be canon.
Oh, man, I don't like that. I mean, that's basically what they've done for Team Fortress 2 content. Like, they don't really make anything so much as they package up community-made stuff. Which, again, like, it's new content for the game, it's merged into mainline, people get updates, but it doesn't fit continuity. It doesn't fit the style of the game. You try and, like, it's almost like people outside of the core user base. And this is not to say that the work they're doing is bad. The work they're doing is great. It just doesn't fit the ethos of the game, at least in my opinion. So, like, you get into situations where you have just, like, random off-the-wall stuff that in isolation looks cool, but applied to a Team Fortress or a Half-Life or an existing universe's experience doesn't quite mesh as well as it could. So it almost feels like a step, how can I phrase this? Sanctioning things, and this kind of goes back to my Elden Ring point, like the developers should steward the mainline art, and then communities should supplement alongside it while allowing the main art to be the same. If we have like core developers taking community art and then like sanctioning it, it removes some of the guidance, I think. And that may be me speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but I feel like the core Half-Life story, the ethos around it, needs to be stewarded by Valve. And then allow the community create, like, it's kind of almost like legends around that ethos, so that way they don't contaminate or change the core of the world. You know what I mean? It's like playing inside of the sandbox, not building the sandbox.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that point of view, but I'm also like, at this point, I have to question how many of the core developers are actually still at Valve that worked on like the original Half-Life or even Half-Life 2. Because like those games have been out a long time now. And so like I imagine a lot of those developers have either passed on to other companies or have, you know, because like we're getting into the computer science world where people are, you know, retiring now. So
Yeah.
where were they at in their career when they built that game? So is like the only one who's still original Gabe himself. I have to question who else is still there. Like I'm still saying that yes, Valve should be the steward of it, but I'm wondering if like fans can take it to places that Valve just doesn't want to go to, right? Like, well, correction, not want to go to, but like you said earlier, their primary focus right now is Steam, the platform, because that's what makes them a majority of their money, I assume. I don't actually know their books. They're not a publicly traded company, so really nobody outside looking in knows. But it's one of those things where they're not going to go away from where they're making the money, but they also still have like from my understanding from interviews, is they kind of don't dictate what people work on. Like you can kind of just work on something as long as it's considered productive. And that's the part where I'm like, so really we just need somebody to get a job at Valve that cares enough to go make Half-Life 3 and get Gabe's blessing on it. But I mean, what's the difference of doing that versus I make a community-based mod or game or something, and then, but instead of like, I guess releasing it, I take it to Valve and pitch it. Because I don't know if that's what Crowbar Collective did, but I know like when they made like that Black Mesa remake of Half-Life 1, it's still not considered canon from what I understand on Reddit. But it's one of those things where like they were building this as a Half-Life 2 mod to remake Half-Life 1 in Half-Life 2's engine. And then somewhere along the line, Valve kind of like stepped in, gave them their blessing. And like then they became a company because I believe it was just a bunch of, people working in their free time. And then they formed Crowbar Collective. And then they started going pretty hard on Black Mesa. I could be entirely wrong about this because I didn't follow it that closely. I just know when the game came out, I was excited. I was one of the people that bought it in early access and started playing the missions as they were rolling out.
Nice. I mean, I do think there is merit in that. But again, like, to your point, they were an external entity. They took it upon themselves for the love of the game to build this thing. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. It's a very interesting thought.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a thought that I'm wondering if like, because like we are starting to see where I don't want to devolve from our topic too much, but I also feel like it's an important piece to kind of speak out of. Is we have like a lot of these IPs that are around the world that have been built up by developers, but have like passed hands. Right? Like Halo was a Bungie title at one time, and now it's 343's title, and Bungie has nothing to do with it anymore. And so in that case, does it make more sense for Xbox to maybe bless third-party studios on continuing the Halo series? Because I'm not saying 343 has done a bad job. I think like Halo Infinite is right now an excellent multiplayer, but it didn't launch that way. It needed to like kind of get there, cook a little. But even then,
I'll say 343's done a pretty shit job. Like, I mean, I'm a Halo fan. I like to forgive 343 for a lot, but like Halo 5 was just hot garbage.
I never played Halo
Infinite.
5.
There's a good reason. It's really not good. And then Halo 4 was fine. They messed up the story with Cortana in 4. And then Infinite's righted the ship as the wrong turn. They almost tried to undo what they did in 4 with the weapon, that is a really strange workaround to kind of torpedoing your story, but whatever. I see your point to where maybe Valve is no longer the right steward just due to being so removed from it. Because you're right in that we've seen other studies or other examples of this where like IP has changed hands across, developers of different generations and it's not gone well. But in that same vein, using another Microsoft title as an example, Coalition's done great stuff with Gears of War. So like you can change who runs an IP inside of a company and it be successful. I think to your point though, you're going to have a better time finding people passionate about this in the community because they live it, like they're fans of it.
Right. So maybe
It's interesting.
Maybe it just needs to come down to companies need to hire the fans of these popular IPs to try to make like the next best one, or maybe form committees that are reviewing other people's like throwing their hat in the ring, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying like it's going to be like, like open sourced or anything like that. But it's, it's one of those things where I think I would like to see where there was more of a collaborative effort, especially in these long-running IPs, because, there's no one more passionate about it than like the original creators and the fans.
Yeah. That's a fascinating thought, actually. I guess like where questions come into play are going to be around money, like who gets the cash from it, where does the revenue split happen? Because ultimately, like, even though the fans are doing it, if the fans are wanting to make money off of it, it's technically the IP of the company. So it's one of those things to where, I mean, are you looking at a licensing situation where a company makes X% of sales? Are you looking at a licensing situation to where there's a flat fee involved? Maybe it, it depends on IP.
Yeah.
But kind of taking this back to Half-Life 3, though, I see your point now to where, again, community projects like Crowbar Collective, Entropy Zero, those are going to potentially be the future.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, see the developers, make like the next iteration of game, but as like we have like in our notes, Valve can't count the 3.
You're not wrong.
So that's why it's like I'm not entirely convinced we're ever gonna actually get a third game from them. I'm wondering if it's always just gonna be spin-offs from now on, where it's, oh, there's a new piece of technology, let's go make a new Half-Life game in it. But it's going to be something that's always going to play alongside it, but never push it forward.
Yeah.
Which, I mean...
Poor Gordon. He's just stuck there with the G-Man and in hell. Literal fucking purgatory. He's just hanging out in stasis.
Yeah, a little bit.
Poor bastard. Oh, well.
At this point, like, do we have to worry about spoilers for like the original Half-Life episode trilogy thing? I guess we should err on the side of caution.
Oh god, dude! Like the first Half-Life, I think came out in '99, so that's been 25 years. If you haven't played it by now, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I
Half-Life
mean,
2.
That one's kind of like a lot of people skip 1 and just go straight to 2, and I would say that's actually kind of fair.
No.
It's a little outdated, my man. Like I went to play it the other day.
Cody?
I went to play the original and I found it very difficult to get immersed in it. Like
You were talking about the game that created the modern first-person shooter.
Well,
I refuse
yeah,
to say it is dated. It still holds up today.
Like
man.
I have respect for it. But I'm also like, that's why I was so excited for Black Mesa, because I thought, finally, there's going to be something I can point someone to so that they can see the start of the game. But the problem is Black Mesa, they changed a few things in the story to get it to connect cohesively, I guess, gameplay-wise. And that's why, like I pointed out earlier, it's not canon because like they didn't get that much blessing from Valve, but it's close to the way things started. But somewhere in the middle, it changed a few things.
That's not good.
But it ended the
damn.
same way, right? It started the same way, it ended the same way. The middle got a little muddled.
I mean, do they focus on the Zen border world appropriately, or do they not?
Oh yeah, you still go to Zen. You still jump around. I would argue that their Zen is a lot better than the originals, because the original, man, it had some of that like that olden day ice skating that FPS had, where it was like when you would stop moving, your character would still like kind of inch forward a bit. That made Zen very difficult.
Oh no, momentum in the movement.
Yeah, but let's face it, like that was such a crap gameplay mechanic. Because it's when you stop moving, you should basically stop moving. Like there's other ways of feeling momentum than that.
Do you stop moving immediately when you're in a sprint in real life, Cody?
See, that I would understand if like I was holding shift and sprinting, but a lot of the times like you're just doing like the jogging bit, and when you stop jogging, do you just stop?
No.
How fast do you jog?
There's a whole person behind it. You get going, man. You're jogging. You're moving.
I don't jog that fast. When I go to stop, I stop.
Oh my word. Okay, fine. And for you, you're right. You should stop. For who I would argue to be the rest of the world, we keep moving a little bit. We got that forward momentum going.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, like you take that step and you stop. Like, how does your character not realize that you're... Because, like, preemptively, like, when you're letting go of the key, that's when you're telling it to stop. It's not the game. Like, it's... I don't know. Yeah. It's just kind of weird because it always felt kind of, like, out of sync with me versus, like, how I would act in real life.
Fair. I don't know. To me, the game is flawless. To this day, I can go back and play it. I've even played through the crappy PS2 port.
But that's you. There's a whole younger generation where these older games, they struggle with it. Like, I believe I've told you this story before, where we were showing my nephew, like, old NES and SNES games because they were on the Virtual Console on Switch. And, like, we were, like, helping him through it. And we were telling him kind of, like, how to, like, play it. Because, there's no more manuals when you play the virtual consoles. And he literally, like, stopped and eventually turned and went, "Can we go play real games now?"
Oh, jeez.
And that's the thing. Is to him, games have always been a high-fidelity item. So the fact is, like, this game, like, there's these older games where you can count the polygons. Not everyone's for it.
I don't like this reality.
Like, hell, even your own kids,
know, man.
They don't know a world before smartphones.
Yeah, but my kids also play old stuff.
Because that's the only thing you let them play.
No, that's not true. They get access to new stuff, too. I just don't let them on the internet.
Well, anyway.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but...
Yeah, I mean...
We've kind of, like, nailed it home quite a bit with... the fact is that there's no third entry in any of these titles. Like, believe me, I love Portal 1 and 2. I wish there was a third.
There's that 2 again.
Left 4 Dead is kind of weird because I'm trying to figure... So, Portal and Half-Life, they connect because you have Aperture Science, where one of the top competing science firms against Black Mesa. Black Mesa, is where Gordon Freeman went to work and started the whole Half-Life thing. So they link up that way. Left 4 Dead, I'm like, is it another universe or is it its own thing? I don't know.
You know, that's an interesting thought. I wonder if it's part of the Half-Life ethos and is like essentially, like an aftermath of some sort. This is all probably like headcanon. I don't think they've ever acknowledged all of these games are in the same universe. Like, I think TF2 is its own universe. Um, you know, Left 4 Dead's probably its own universe. But it would be cool if there was continuity across all of them. Like, everything in the orange box is all part of the same world.
That would be very cool. But I'm also like, how would that work with TF2?
Yeah. Well, there is like portal technology and respawn and all that stuff.
True. But, it's
Oh,
also
dude.
very highly comic or comedic, especially when you have like
True.
the soldiers spouting out lines like, last one to die locks the door.
Yep. Dude, have you let's do a slight tirade over into Team Fortress 2. We should really just call this like Valve Can't Count to 3 because we've covered all their titles at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But have you seen Emesis Blue?
Emesis Blue. I can't say that I have.
It's a 1 hour and 48-minute film on YouTube done by Fortress Films about the Team Fortress 2 universe. And it's some really dark, twisted shit. It's really, really good. It's a nice take on, like, the respawn, what it does to people. Red and Blue, they were sold a product that was, supposed to facilitate essentially endless war with the mercenaries. And if you're not lucky and you catch the respawn at the right time, it like it pulls the humanity out of you and turns you into a monster. It's very interesting.
And
Like, very, very interesting. I like the concept.
and this is why we can't teleport bread anymore.
What do you mean?
Oh, did you not see that TF2 short where they were teleporting
Oh, of
bread?
course. That's what inspired the film, man. Like, the bread that gets, like, teeth and starts trying to eat people.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's for sure worth watching if you've not seen it. I'm surprised you missed that one. Because you're really plugged into the game side of stuff. I mean, it's got 11 million views, if that tells you anything. It's, like, really well done.
Yeah, I just added it to my watch later list. I'll definitely be checking it out. The thing is I'm a big Half-Life fan, and in turn that has turned me into a Portal fan. It's when it comes to their other titles, like Left 4 Dead and Left 4 Dead 2, I played them at the time because they were great friend games, right? Like I could get a couple buddies on, this predates Discord, so this would have been Skype or TeamSpeak, one of the two. Getting a couple buddies on that and then jumping into a game, right? Like, we would go in and do the things. And I remember when Valve, because I was playing Left 4 Dead 1, I played through. So I wanted to learn the game. So I played through the episodes one at a time on my own on one of the easiest difficulties, just so, because I realized I was on my own with bots, and I just wanted to learn the mechanics of the maps, and also not the mechanics, but also learn how to play the game. And then once I got that, I basically just started playing with my friends, and I can't recall ever not doing that, where if I played Left 4 Dead or Left 4 Dead 2 being solo again. When you play with your friends, it's kind of hard to go through the narrative parts and whatnot, right? Because usually, at least my friends, I don't know about yours, we're always just skip the cutscene, we want to get back to the playing.
Mash the button.
Yeah, so I was never really connected to that world. Dota 2, what the fuck? It exists.
I gotta say, I was never a MOBA guy, dude. like I remember growing up, everyone played League of Legends, and then it was Heroes of New Earth, and then that died off, and Dota 2 came out, and that kind of stole everybody. I never got into MOBAs altogether. Like I never got the concept of like pulling lanes and pushing and all that stuff. It was like too hectic, almost.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like my wife got into it for a bit. She got real deep into League of Legends. I was trying to play, but I just couldn't get into it. I guess
Yeah.
I'm just not one for strategy. Like, I did play like StarCraft and StarCraft 2, but I will admit I played the campaigns on like easy or normal difficulty, right? It wasn't ever me trying to challenge it. I was more interested in the lore of the
Yeah.
of the strategy games, and then I was interested in the gameplay. And you know, it stuck with
Yeah.
me when it came through with like MOBAs and League of Legends. I did like the fact is that the camera got stuck to me, and I could just focus on my one character. In Dota 2, that's not a thing. There's like a console command where you can kind of get the same thing, but it doesn't play the same. So I just really couldn't get into that one at all.
Yeah.
I completely missed it, but I think it was because, like, especially at the time, I was way more interested in shooters. Like, the whole time I was growing up, it was always about the shooters. So, you know, Half-Life went into Counter-Strike because, again, they're kind of connected. Counter-Strike was a mod for Half-Life and then became its own game. So,
Yep.
and now we have the latest one is Counter Strike 2, though it was basically just a reskin of Counter Strike Global Offensive. And, like, I have thousands of hours in Counter Strike. I don't have the same time in a MOBA. Like, not even remotely.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So I guess we've just.
I mean, if you count all the way back to like Counter Strike 1.2, which is when I think I got into it, like, I don't even want to think about the volume of time I've played up to 1.6 and then Source and then jumping into CSGO. Like, yeah.
I mean, what I think we just basically learned is you and I are just not the target market for MOBAs.
That's true. I say it a lot, like, if not everyone has to like we were talking about with Elden Ring, not everyone is the target demographic for a game, and that's okay.
But that being said, I know I did thoroughly enjoy TF2, especially with friends. Like, that was like one of the ones where I did play alone. Like, Counter-Strike, it was always with friends. But Team Fortress, I would find pugs all the time to go do it and go play it. And I even got, like, as deep as where I started watching the esports leagues for it.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, because I got, like, real into it. The whole idea of, like, the payload pushing and all this other stuff. And also, like, you know, control point catching. And then eventually that led me into Overwatch. Overwatch is just basically a more refined version of TF2. Except for the lore, I would argue, is a lot more interesting.
I don't know, man. Watch Emesis Blue. It paints it really interestingly. But yeah, no, I think it says a lot that Team Fortress is legitimately almost 20 years old and is still played today. Like, that says a lot about the quality of the product. I know I jumped into Overwatch whenever it came out, and I mean, I don't know if this is a controversial take at this point after Overwatch 2 and how much Blizzard fumbled that bag, but I was never the biggest fan. I basically played Overwatch and was like, why would I play this when I can go play Team Fortress 2 and do the same thing, except in a world I love more? And admittedly, I realize that's probably a very niche take, but at the end of the day, when you're like me and you've invested, dear God, if you add up like Orange Box over the last 20 years, I cannot imagine how many hours I put into Team Fortress. probably thousands. It's got to be thousands. Um, like I'm very clearly biased, I guess is my point.
Yeah, it was just. I think one of the things that really hooked me was just kind of like the hype behind Overwatch. Because I remember, like, I had put down TF2 a long time ago. Like, I play it every now and
Yeah.
again with friends, but it's not a game I pick up regularly. And then it was, God, I forget. I, I think, I want to say it was like 2016 or 2015. One of those two. Like, I saw the trailer for it, and I don't know. I'm just a sucker for heroes. Like, My Hero Academia
Yeah.
is like one of my all-time favorite animes right now, and it's all about heroes. In even Overwatch, they are all about the heroes and the like seeing Tracer skip around that museum, um, and just kind of like saving those two boys and putting them off by like another, behind a statue and saying like, we got to go save the world, and then like pings off. Like, I don't think that's actually the phrase she actually used, but that's kind of like what I'm remembering it as. And it was just that whole trailer just sold me, and it filled a void of not playing TF2 left, because it's like, I have
Yeah.
a million other games I play. I don't have time to stick with one for like millions of hours anymore because I have so many.
Yeah. No, I mean, fair, dude. Like, if you dug it, you dug it. There's nothing wrong with it. It was a very polished experience. Like, I remember whenever Blizzard launched it, that was back whenever they still had a fair amount of respect. And, like, it was a very polished quality experience. I guess it just, again, it goes back to I just wasn't the target demographic. I'm like an old school, you know, I just like older stuff. And I've always stuck with Team Fortress because of it. Like, even TF2 today, like, I primarily go into community servers just because I don't like Make Your Match and what it did to how the game functioned. But that's it's a me thing. And I know it's a main thing. Um, there's just something to be said for like old school server browsing and seeing what you stumble upon. And I don't know that any modern game really has that anymore. Especially not like with the old Valve Server Explorer.
No, because like now you have it where it's really based off of like the company servers. Like,
Yeah.
people, when like you're playing on TF2, usually you're either playing on official or community servers. Nowadays, people mostly tend to lean towards community servers because they are a lot more moderated. So usually if hackers get in,
Yeah.
a moderator will kick them out. Unless it's like middle of the night and the moderator is asleep, then it's like, well, we'll just pause and come back tomorrow.
Yeah. I will say though, Valve recently pushed an update to TF2 that removed a ton of malicious players. There's still all the idler bots, but a lot of like the aim bots are gone, or at least they were for a bit. So if you want to play Team Fortress, now's the time. You can get in and have some fun and not have your experience ruined. But admittedly, I don't know how long that's going to be, just due to the way bots work. Like, I mean, there's entire communities of cheaters. I'm positive they will find a way to break through the new anti-cheat.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen many a discords that have to do with cheats and cheat bots and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean it's one of those things, right? It's also kind of a bit of a cat and mouse game. Like they come up with a new hack, the developers come up with a new solution. So it's
Yep.
right now we're in the good time because they haven't figured out how to hack the new one, but eventually they will, and then rinse repeat.
Yep. Yep.
But it's that is something that is kind of a bit of a downside when it comes to like some of these older titles, right? It's really up to the moderators to be moderating the servers and watch for cheaters. Where it's like, yes, they
Yeah.
do sometimes fix the code and it does block them, but it only stays fixed for so long. But it's like when you're in Overwatch or even CS2, I can't say Go anymore because I don't think you can actually download Go. I think it just became Counter-Strike 2.
Yeah. Which that's another thing. Like, players are flocking to CS Source now because of how shit 2 is. But that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah. But it still is, it's one of those things where it's like when it's based off of like server architecture where the company is like the main proponent of it, it's kind of easier for them to deal with cheaters and hackers, mostly because they have all the data, versus when it's on a community server. They may try to reach out to that community manager and be like, hey, can I get your logs?
Yeah.
But now, since they own the server infrastructure, they have all of that. They have the logs. They have like the active connections. They can analyze and watch a player live, like while they're playing the game, and be like, "Are you cheating?"
Yeah. I just think it's telling that for the longest time, Valve servers were the worst way to play TF2.
Mm-hmm.
It's just funny because, like, if you wanted a decent experience with no cheaters, you went to the community because Valve was just letting the game atrophy, which is a damn shame. But, enough beating that dead horse. I've kind of said my piece on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we both have. I wish Valve would make a third game. They haven't yet. We talked about various reasons why, and we also said how much we loved like the previous title. So I'm not sure there's much else to be said.
Fair enough, man. Oh boy. All right. Now for let's do the boring section. TypeScript and all things Node. So full disclosure for everyone listening, I'm a full-time TypeScript developer. So needless to say, I have very what's the word I'm looking for here? I have very strong opinions about this language and its application on top of the NodeJS runtime. In my opinion, some of the best tools ever to build applications. And I think it's revolutionized server and web development if you're working in JavaScript. But that's my 2 cents. Cody, you want to kind of dive us into this a little bit and start pulling a thread?
Sure. So also to clarify, I am basically a full-time Go developer, though I am currently in the SRE department, so I'm mostly working on server-side technologies. And Node has been one of those pain points where, because I used to also be a full-time web developer or web software engineer. I'm not sure what the title was. But so like I had to deal with Node a lot more back then. But back then there wasn't really TypeScript. We had JavaScript. And from my understanding, TypeScript is like a super subset of that. Like, Rob, can you take me, who's like at a 10,000 foot view, and bring me into at least like 1,000 foot view?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to kind of describe it is TypeScript took C#'s type system and put it in a JavaScript. And the community took that and ran with it. And now pretty much everything in the Node space that's worth using or is being used is written in TypeScript, because it took like a language that was extremely type unsafe. Like JavaScript, you can basically monkey patch and juggle and do whatever you want. And it made it strictly typed, which is, I mean, it's a boon. For the most part, being able to code both on the browser and the server in the same language, have type-saved code from server into the client via a shared set of specs, is insanely powerful to me. As someone who does a lot of client development, talking with server applications, knowing that my contracts are in sync because they're essentially operating off of the same code base for the contract is awesome. That being said, I mean, it's not perfect. Honestly, there are still certain really niche, small legacy packages that exist that don't have types. that create the uncertainties inside of, your nice walled garden. And if you're on like an older code base, bringing TypeScript into it, it's extremely difficult to kind of get everything to communicate appropriately because you're still dealing with that type juggling. But TypeScript also gives you tools to kind of get around that with type guards and other things. And there's like utility types that kind of enable some flexibility there. All that is to say, yeah, and at the end of the day, it's like strongly typed TypeScript or strongly typed JavaScript. That's the easiest way to describe it.
Okay. And I mean that a lot of that makes perfect sense to me, especially because it's like I remember in like back when I was like, working on web applications all the time, building like the front end was where the JavaScript came in. Cuz like, I was PHP, Python, and then Go, and also some C and C++ in there. I never got the chance to build like a JavaScript app on the back end. But at least on front end, I remember some of like the places I worked at, the front end would be so convoluted. It would just be like, go to the front end guy and just be like, how does one put button on screen? And he would then send you a snippet of code and you copy and pasted it and kind of slapped your name on it and went git commit push.
Yeah, no. I will say all these different tools, all these different layers, it's made things dramatically more complicated. Yeah, and I think that goes even for like other languages. You brought up, PHP and Go. Like, Go is a much more complex system to run than some other languages that were out there. And even PHP itself has become much more complicated in the way you write it, to where the barrier of entry for this stuff has all just gotten extreme. And I feel like that's not going to get better. Like, I don't ever see us returning to the days of slapping a file on a shared host and it just running. And you have no idea what it's doing half the time because you didn't write unit tests and there's no types around things. So stuff just randomly, silently fails and you pray it doesn't break. I think we've gained a lot with this complexity. But I also think, to your point, like, if you're not living it, if you're not breathing it, you like lose the ability to reason inside of it, which is a shame.
Right. It's about that object oriented programming paradigm, right? It's learning to live within the types, especially because a lot of languages are now shifting to be like more type driven. Like we were talking about JavaScript back in the day, it was you could monkey patch the shit out of it and it would work. But then the moment somebody went and touched it, they'd be pulling their hair out all day until they found another monkey patch solution that would work. And sometimes we were trying to use features that didn't exist in the browsers yet because like we were excited for it and we download some shim and put it in, though I doubt that part's died. But it really says a lot when like types are the way to go for collaborative efforts, and I'm willing to die on that hill because it's one of those things where I feel like if you hand someone a function, they can kind of get it to work. But if you hand someone an object and say, here's the methods you can apply to it after you instantiate it with the data I need, it's a lot more clear.
Yeah, no, written contracts are insanely powerful from like a code maintainability perspective. Knowing what you're getting and what you're supposed to give is probably one of the most impactful things in software engineering you can ever have. And like that is the whole stack. If you're working with product, knowing what they want and what they expect you to put out is immensely powerful. And if you take that up a layer further to where the business is working with product, it's the same thing. Like you need to know what you're doing. It's kind of crazy to a degree to think that at the lower levels of that pyramid where the software was actually being written, there were so many languages that just kind of let you do whatever. Like there was no real guarantee the application was going to get what it needed because it didn't say what it needed.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you and I both seem to be in line with like types are good. TypeScript seems like a very valid evolution of the JavaScript language. But I am wondering if this pain point has been solved yet, because the last time I was touching Node.js is I remember the builds. The builds are a nightmare, especially because it's like, which tool do you use? Because there's like Webpack, V, Rollup, fucking some other acronym, you name it. It's gonna build your JavaScript, but they all build differently. They all like are usually based off of like some configuration file that is completely unheard of to manage. How has that progressed in recent times?
So most of the time anymore, or at least the tools I use, and full disclosure, I do Svelte, React, Vue, Nest.js, and Express. Like, for the most part, they have idiomatic ways that they build, and they shield you from it. Like, Svelte, Vue, React, and Nest all have CLI tools, and they completely abstract the build away from you. The only time you really need to get into that anymore is when you need to do something the framework doesn't actively support. So you're going outside of the guardrails intentionally, and you're opening yourself up to pain because you've explicitly said, I want to do this. So that exists. For instance, when we were working on that Node project together, we were going way outside the guardrails. We were doing things people just didn't do. So we had to deal with a lot of that pain. If you're using the tool idiomatically inside of the community, you really don't have it anymore because the developers have abstracted it away. And when I say the developers, the community devs, not so much you as the engineer.
Yeah. Oh, and just be clear to the audience, Rob and I, we used to work together at the same company, and we were working on an implementation of front-end islands. And
yes,
it did eventually, at least I believe it saw the light of day. I don't know. I left before it was released.
I saw the ship out, man. It's driving a lot of the front end now. And that work, they've actually piggybacked on it, and they're taking it to the logical conclusion that we planned out, 2 years ago now, which is crazy to think it's been 2 years, but they're taking it the last mile. They're getting it on to the modern tech all the way.
Excellent. So, just also to make it more clear for those who haven't heard about front-end islands, it's where you do server-side rendered components, but then you do the hydration on the client side. That sounds a lot like SSR, but you're injecting them into your flow where it's not the front end app is not serving the front end. It still is your monolithic app, but it's using parts of what eventually may become your new front end service. Just want to be clear.
It's basically a way of serving parts of a page in isolation. So your header would be an island, your sidebar is an island, and they're both rendered by the front controller, but they're done so independently.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so it sounds like
I gotta say, man,
the solution to the build system was abstracted away, make it another black box thing that nobody's ever going to touch.
I mean, more or less, yeah. I think at this point, Veet's kind of won the battle until it hasn't. But ask me how much I touch Veet config. I don't really.
I thought that
I
was
use all the defaults in SvelteKit. Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say, I thought that was Veet's whole tagline is you don't need a config file.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, cool. So they're sticking
It's
to that
insanely powerful.
still.
Yes. And it's why so many people have adopted it as the bundler of choice.
That's very good. Yeah, because I also remember that was probably one of the biggest pains, especially in the PHP world, is you have to also. So PHP doesn't require much processing, so you kind of just build it into a Docker container and push it up. But except for the problem is you have to bundle your front end. You have to run your bundlers and all this other stuff. So it's like, that was always the pain point. Because that's where shit would break. And if it broke, I would just kind of be like, well, here goes my afternoon.
Do you remember Pre?
Oh, God. I believe I do.
That PHP tried to get in on the transpilation craze. Let me see if I can find it. PHP Pre. God. Yeah, that thing died.
Yeah.
No one does that. Thank goodness.
Well, I mean, like, I remember, like, there was a time that someone tried to argue that you should minify your PHP because
Oh God.
it'd take up less space on the server. And I kind of remember going, but why do I care? Like, we're literally saving kilobytes. It's not like my PHP files are massive. At least they shouldn't be. Except for then, Composer came around and, I'm not saying it's as bad as NPM, but I do remember, like, Composer install taking sometimes a little bit of time. Mostly because a lot of places I worked, we had monolithic code bases and a lot, an absolute megaton of like legacy libraries that we had to just use the git pull instead of like because Composer has like various ways it downloads code, and I remember like one of the ways is it does it through like git, and that's like the slowest method, and in some legacy libraries that's the only method.
At least it was available, man. It's better than frickin' Pear, if you remember Pear.
Well, right. That was the one that was trying to use Peckle for the same libraries, right?
No, Peckle was the extension manager. Pear was the package manager that would install them for the entire server.
Oh, yeah. But, like, I remember, didn't Pear also think that they were going to eventually be, like, supporting, developer space libraries?
Maybe? Yeah. It's been so long.
Yeah,
because Composer came out and ate everyone's lunch.
Well, yeah, because it at the end of the day it just works.
Yeah.
It's also like the same way in Node, from what I understand. Well, actually, correction, in Node there's a bit of a war. At least what I've seen in my professional career. You have people that are yarn all the things, and then you have the other people that are like, but NPM comes with Node, we should just use that. Which camp do you live in?
Yeah. Yarn is better, but NPM has enough to where it's workable now. Back whenever NPM was like, I'd say pre-version 8, it was not great. And Yarn made a ton of sense. But with NPM like 9 plus, 10 plus, there's a lot less need for Yarn, in my opinion. NPM has workspaces now. It's got relatively fast package resolution. You're getting into the point now to where it supports a lot of like features that are nice. I think even PNP support is coming at some point. Like they're taking all the ideas of Yarn and just bringing them mainline. So like Yarn is a very good thing, especially for the community at large, but it's becoming less of a requirement and more of like an additional nicety. Or if you prefer the CLI interface, like you use Yarn, things like that. It's still like objectively better, but it's not a requirement.
And then this is the part where I go, this is why I like Go, because I'll just do go get, implement it, and then run a quick go mod tidy just to make sure I have no needless imports. And then I say go build, and it just figures it out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to run go install for it to, like, install all my stuff. Like, I guess I could run go mod vendor, and, some people recommend that. Like, I think it really depends on how, what do you call it? like how much you want to store like in your Git repo to make your code highly available.
Yeah.
But you know, if it's a personal project or a small enough project, I'm gonna be like, don't bother with the Go mod vendor, because like a lot of times people will forget to update it and stuff like that. It's definitely a practice that you have to get into. But
Yeah.
you know, again, I feel like Go has the better alternative to how we're handling dependencies. Just in the fact is that as a developer, I don't need to worry. I get clone and then I do Go run if it's like my local, or if I want to build for, you know, another architecture or even the same architecture, I could just do Go build and use environment variables to construct like for which operating system and for like what architecture. And I don't really have to think about it besides that, right? And it's only if like I go, oh, I want to use this new library. There's like two ways of doing it. There's one way is where you do Go get and it will pull it down, but you know, you have to make sure you implement it before you do Go mod tidy, or it'll just clean it up again. At least I think it will clean it up. I could be wrong about that part. But you know, again, it's like, or even if like you forget to do that Go get and you just say import from this GitHub repository and go implement the code and then do Go mod tidy, it's going to be like, oh, you've added a dependency and you've implemented it. Let me go download that for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I think it also just comes down to, like, right tool for the right job at the right company. You know, if you're doing computationally intensive applications, something like Go, Rust, C, you know, whatever your language of choice is, kind of like you, I'm partial to Go. I like the way their concurrency model works.
I also like that it's garbage collected.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I don't have to manage memory. It's simple. It's fast. It just works. But you don't need the overhead of compilation and everything at all companies, depending upon what you're doing. If you're building simple web software, it's a nice to have, not a must have. Because, like, you're going to find that a language like Python will do pretty much everything and do it well. Or, that's not true. It will do it well enough to where the application works and can make money. In my opinion, going to be honest, I hate Python. I don't like the fact that it depends on white space. I don't like the standard library and the way it works. I genuinely do prefer, like, the Node standard lib or the Go standard lib. But I also acknowledge that it's a tool that serves a purpose. And I think you could say that about a lot of languages. And pretty much all of them will do a job well enough. And for the situations you find yourself in where they don't, that's when you should reach for another tool. Like, I wouldn't try and do queues in PHP. But if I just need a simple thing to throw up on a shared server, probably going to do it in PHP because it's supported natively. If I need to do something really computationally intensive for the web, probably going to go for Go. If I need to build like a desktop application in a memory safe way that I can then ship across a bunch of different vendor OSs, probably going to use Rust. You know, it's just like, wow. Go beyond being I am a ex developer and transition to being a software engineer with multiple tools in your bag.
I'm kind of surprised about that last one. I thought you were going to say Electron, because every company under the sun needs an Electron app. And I'm not saying that like I'm excited for it. It's just something I've noticed, like Slack, Discord, VS Code. There's like, I'm looking at like my little taskbar on my Mac here, and I'm actually like counting even more of those apps are Electron. So like I thought for sure you were going to say Electron for the desktop part.
Well, I mean, another way of looking at that is like how many of those apps are web apps for web companies?
Oh yeah, that's the other part is like most of the apps I use today exist on the web in some form.
Well, I mean, you brought it up, so I'm going to do it. Spotify, Electron. Discord, Electron. I have VS Code. That's Electron.
Oh, also my
Slack.
terminal is Hyper.js. That's also Electron.
That's Electron. I mean, I'd argue Hyper should probably be written in Rust or something native, so it's not as unstable as it is. But that's not a discussion.
Not stable enough for me.
But,
it gets the job done.
I used it back when it was brand new. It was not at the time, but yeah.
I tried back then.
All
It's
that is
better
all that
now.
is to say. Okay, fair enough. Maybe I'll pull it down. I did like the customization, but anyway, all that is to say, right tool for the right job. If you got something computationally intensive, use the right language. If you're just building a simple website, do something simple, because you don't need to make it complicated.
Okay, and with that, we're coming up on time. So, is there any last minute things you want to bring up, Rob?
I mean, goes without saying, but thanks for the conversation as always. To all of our listeners, thank you for being here with us. Do the old usual, a like, share, comment, and subscribe. Makes a massive difference for us, and we greatly appreciate it. And we'll look forward to talking to you next week.